Welcome, everyone. Grab a seat because today's explainer is quite literally a masterclass on a skill that can entirely make or break your professional trajectory. We're talking about writing business letters. Whether you're dealing with a bank, applying for your absolute dream job, or just trying to get a clear point across to a colleague, the way you write speaks volumes about you before you even walk into the room. In the business world, your letter is very often your first impression. If your formatting is a mess, well, people are instantly going to perceive you as a messy professional. So, grab your notebooks. We are going to master the fundamental mechanics of professional business correspondence together. Here is our syllabus for today's session. First, types of business correspondence. Second, structuring the business letter. Third, organizing your letter's content. Fourth, the language of business. And finally, number 5, writing your job application. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, types of business correspondence. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of formatting and rigid rules, we really need to understand what fundamentally separates the writing you do every day from the writing you do in the workplace. Let me pose a question to the class here. Imagine writing a formal letter to a bank manager about a change of address, and then an email to a friend about that exact same move. How is the formal letter different from the personal one? I actually want you to actively think about this. Put yourself in the recipient's shoes. A bank manager is reading hundreds of letters a week, while your friend is just reading one. Consider the layout, the content, the expressions you'd use, the amount of info you're conveying. Why do they absolutely have to be different to be effective? Okay, let's break it down. A formal letter uses a definite, non-flexible format. It is completely purpose-driven. And why is that rigid structure so necessary? Well, because in business, time is money. Absolute clarity prevents those costly, cascading errors. You want to get straight to the point, so it's intentionally brief. No extra fluff, no rambling. But on the flip side, a personal letter, that's just like a long-distance private conversation. It's totally flexible, the content varies, and honestly, you can chat about the weather for 3 paragraphs before you even get to your point. The professional context entirely dictates the style. Take a look at this real-world example of what official external correspondence looks like. It's a formal reply confirming a booking, and notice the highly structured professional appearance right from the top. We've got the company letterhead instantly establishing authority, a super clear subject line telling you exactly what the document is about, and a very formal salutation. It leaves absolutely zero room for confusion, using bulleted itineraries to set incredibly clear expectations. It's polite, sure, but ultimately, it's an instrument of precision. But the second you go inside a business, the environment changes completely. Contrast that external letter with this internal company memo. Inside an organization, correspondence gets much briefer and highly factual. Notice how it totally drops the formal formatting of the external letter. We just have a to, from, date, and a rapid-fire message about company rules. Internal communications strip away all those PR-focused pleasantries because the context is already shared among colleagues. The whole goal here is purely the efficient transfer of information so everybody can just get back to work. Moving right along, Section 2, structuring the business letter. Now that we know what we're looking at, let's dissect the physical anatomy of the page. The absolute industry standard you need to know is the fully blocked layout. This is basically the universally accepted way to set out any business communication. The main feature? Every single line begins flush against the left-hand margin. It also uses open punctuation. What does that mean in practice? Instead of writing November 5th, 2024, period, you just minimize the visual clutter. You drop those unnecessary marks in the addresses and dates and only use commas in the main text when it's strictly necessary for grammar. And finally, you leave one clear line space between each distinct section. Remember, white space is a superpower for readability. Good design makes it easier to write and way easier for a tired executive to read. Let's run through the actual building blocks of this anatomy so you can put it together yourself. You always start with the letterhead and the date. Quick tip, spelling out the month is highly preferred so you completely avoid any international date format confusion. Then comes the salutation, like Dear Mr. or Mrs. Smith. A clear heading or subject line is next, which acts like a title. Then your carefully crafted body paragraphs. After that, a brief leave-taking note to wrap up the message, followed by your complimentary close. Now, listen closely because here is a golden rule that so many professionals get wrong. The level of your salutation firmly dictates your close. If you open with Dear Sir or Madam, you absolutely must close with Yours faithfully. But if you use a specific name, like Dear Miss Sharma, you close with Yours sincerely. Master that rule and you will always signal both respect and structural competence. All right, Section 3, organizing your letter's content. So you've got the page looking pristine, but what about the logical flow of your argument? Since business correspondence is so functional, organizing your information logically is basically non-negotiable. Here's a foolproof 3-step drafting process for you. Step 1, enlist the points you need to include. Just brainstorm them all out. Step 2, sequence them in order of logical importance. Step 3 is the big one. Choose your approach. Are you going to use a direct approach, getting right to the point in the very first paragraph, or an indirect approach, where you provide substantial background context first? Here is my professor's rule of thumb. Always use the direct approach for routine requests so the reader knows exactly what you need right out of the gate. But use the indirect approach when you have to deliver bad news or make a really persuasive sales pitch, where giving context first either cushions the blow or builds your case. If you want a standard plug-and-play logical flow for your paragraphs, just use this exact blueprint. Look at how seamlessly one step flows into the next to build a narrative. First, open with a greeting to establish that professional connection. Second, and immediately, state your purpose so they know exactly why they're reading this. Third, and only then, provide your supporting information or news. Fourth, logically transition into making your specific request or agreeing to theirs. Fifth, specify the exact next action to be taken so nobody is left guessing. And sixth, a professional closing. Follow this sequence and your reader will never, ever be confused about why you're writing or what you expect them to do.
Moving into Section 4, the language of business.
This is where we introduce the specialized vocabulary and those structural signposts that make up the true language of the modern workplace. It is not just what you say, it's precisely how you frame it. Imagine you have to give a hard refusal to a request. The intent is exactly the same, but if you use the informal "no way," you create instant burning friction. In a professional setting, that exact same refusal has to be dressed up in completely different language. The formal equivalent is, "I regret to inform you that this would be very difficult to make possible." Just think about the immense psychological impact of that shift. It instantly removes the personal friction and replaces it with polite, professional distance. It preserves your long-term working relationship, even when you're delivering a firm no. Business language relies heavily on using these formulaic chunks of text to fulfill highly specific functions. I like to think of it as mapping functions to structures. Why use pre-built chunks? Because it massively reduces your cognitive load. You do not have to reinvent the wheel every time you write an email. If your core function is connecting with the reader, your structure is simply, "I am writing to inquire," or "I am writing to inform." If your function is emphasizing, you don't start using all caps or a bunch of exclamation points. Instead, you elegantly plug in the structure, "I would like to draw your attention to." This whole matrix is basically a highly practical cheat sheet for hitting the perfect professional tone.
Let's keep exploring this vocabulary framework. How do you firmly assert rigorous requirements without sounding dictatorial or, frankly, aggressive? Well, for obligation or necessity, you deploy the structure "I must insist on" or "it will be necessary to." And what if you mess up? How do you handle a mistake without sounding overly emotional or weak? For apologizing, you use "I regret the inconvenience" or "I must apologize." Notice how these structures take the hot emotion totally out of the equation. "I regret the inconvenience" is completely objective. It professionally acknowledges the issue without you having to grovel and without unnecessarily exposing your company to legal liability.
And finally, class, Section 5, writing your job application. This is it. This is the highest stakes application of today's theory, landing a job. Whether your application actually makes the shortlist depends entirely on the impression your cover letter makes. There are 5 absolute non-negotiable elements that every successful job application letter must have. Number 1, mention the specific position you're applying for and exactly where you found it, so HR knows which file to put you in. Number 2, expand on relevant experience. Please do not just regurgitate your resume, they already have it. Curate the space to prove you're the perfect fit for this specific role. Number 3, explicitly emphasize your suitability and enthusiasm for the job. Number 4, clearly note that you've attached a copy of your resume for their convenience. And number 5, state your willingness and availability to quickly attend an interview. Let's analyze a quick excerpt from our text's activity to see this theory perfectly executed in the wild. The writer states, "I feel I am well qualified for the position. I have a level 2 coaching certificate and have had 2 years experience as part-time coach." Now, what makes this so incredibly effective is how well it nails rule number 2. Notice how it highlights relevant background, that specific certificate and the highly targeted coaching experience, without just repeating everything else on the CV. It's targeted, it's concise, and it is incredibly effective at making the case for an interview. And remember to heavily lean on those formulaic structures we talked about a minute ago. Look at these examples for starting your applications confidently. Use commanding, connecting structures like, I am writing to apply for the post of, or I am writing in response to your advertisement for. Guide the hiring manager's eye right to your exact purpose. Kick off your application strongly and professionally from the very first sentence to establish immediate credibility. Okay, it's time for a quick application challenge to test what you've learned. This fill-in-the-blanks exercise is straight from our text. Look at this sentence. I am writing to blank 1 about the possibility of a blank 2 in any type of hotel work. Take a few seconds. If you were applying for a crucial role tomorrow, what specific words from the vocabulary lists we just covered would you place in these blanks to sound as utterly professional as possible? Let's see how you did. The correct answers are, I am writing to inquire about the possibility of a vacancy in any type of hotel work. Sure, you could easily say, ask about a job, but inquire about a vacancy profoundly elevates your writing. A job is simply what you do, but recognizing a vacancy implies you have a fundamental understanding of corporate structure and an organization's hiring needs. It proves you speak their language, instantly elevating you from an amateur applicant to a seasoned professional in the eyes of whoever is reading it.
So before you hit send on your next crucial email or cover letter, pause for a second. I want you to actively audit your own communication skills based on the strict new standards we've established today. Think back to the last professional correspondence you sent out. Audit your layout. Did it actually follow the fully blocked standard? Audit your flow. Did it maintain a direct, logical narrative? Did you leverage the proper formulaic strictures? Are you communicating like an amateur, or are you utilizing the true language of business? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep practicing your writing, and class dismissed.